So, welcome back to Latin, Salute, Discipula. I hope you had a good spring break. We are back to the online classes, for better or for worse. Let's focus on the perks, though. There is, something kind of nice about getting to stay home. And yeah, go ahead and make sure you get your notebook out. Make sure you have your textbook out. I want you guys to be following along. We're going to do a few translations today, so just get that ready. All right. And then just a look at this week. So you guys know that we're doing class, like full on class on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. On those days, you can expect a video in your Google form. And then on either, for me, Tuesday or Thursday night at 8 p.m. or by 8 p.m., a homework assignment will be due probably still once a week for me. And then sometimes there might be other things included in Google Forms. So today we're just going to review Chapter 17. We're going to do 3 translations in this video that I want you guys to follow along with and try out on your own via pausing the video. Just to brush up on those relative clauses. Remember, we were looking at relative clauses before the break. And then tomorrow night, the first 5 lectiones will be due by 8 p.m. I will talk a little more about that later, but I'm wanting you to enter that into the Google form for today. Emailing it to me is okay if somehow you don't have access to the Google form on Thursday night, but I'd rather you enter them into Thursday. And this video is going to be the length that, or it's going to be short enough where you'll have time within your normal 50-minute class time to probably work through at least most of those right now, right after the video, while it's still fresh in your mind. Okay, and then Friday we will have a video checking those lectiones, and we'll also have a Chapter 17 vocab assessment, meaning quiz. So it's the first time we're going to do this for this class, but I will just have a Google form on Friday with 10 to 15 vocab words in Latin, and you will enter in their English translation. You can look at your vocab words right before it, but I want you guys to put that away when you actually start to do the quiz. Treat it like a quiz. Please be mature. You guys know how vocab quizzes are. They're not that tricky. I just need you to actually look at the words and do your best. And yeah, don't take advantage of this situation we're in here. Okay, this is our Monday motto, though it is Wednesday. My joke is that this is a very straightforward translation. I assume you guys probably already blasted through it while I was talking. That is a joke, of course. We do not know this language. This is Romanian. This is not Latin. This is the motto of Polytechnica University of Timișoara, apparently. And I was just looking for mottos with vocab words for my older kids from chapter 20, and I stumbled upon this, and it seems super appropriate. So this translates to, it's not the walls that make a school, but the spirit living inside. It's wildly appropriate, guys. So yeah, this is still full-on school. I really hope you're engaging with this uh, um, as intensely as you would if we were actually in class, because we are in class. This is class, guys. Okay, and so that is Romanian. Okay, the oftentimes forgotten Romance language, which is funny since, go figure, Romanian would be a Romance language. But Romania is over there on that Balkan Peninsula right to the west of Italy, across the Adriatic. So it makes sense that they would get a language that is deeply influenced by Latin. Okay, this is just a refresher this is the Chapter 17 vocab. You're going to need that. I do see there's, I don't know, it's almost 4 or 5 textbooks in my classroom in the building. So I know at least some of you don't have your books. You could purchase a digital version of it. And we could figure it out. It might take a little while, but we can get those books to you somehow. You guys and your parents aren't really supposed to come into the building, but we could coordinate something where you could just drive by and I hand them off to you with gloves on or something. I don't know, but you can email me if you think that you're one of those people. I should have gotten a list the other day when I was actually in the classroom, but I was able to at least track some of them. Oh yeah, and then also this again, especially if you don't have your textbook, this chart, the upper half of this is something you're gonna need. We'll go back to that. Okay, a little more of Monday mottos. Age quod agis. I To be honest, guys, I kind of lose track of if I do these with just my older kids or if I've already done this with you. I don't think I would have done this with you guys, but maybe. But this is just a we have a tiny little relative clause here. And age is from ago agere, meaning like to do or to act. Um, and here it is in the imperative. So I'm going to move really quickly in case we did do this. And so this would translate to just do what you are doing. Um, yeah, not the best example of a relative clause. Surprisingly, couldn't find a great plethora of relative clauses in college mottos. This one is okay, though. Spiritus est qui vivificat. Okay, spiritus is basically like animus in that it means spirit. Go figure. It's actually fourth declension, which you guys will get in chapter 20. So that's kind of exciting. And then vivificio, vivificare, is to give life. It's related to vivo vivere, but not quite. So this would translate to, and if again, I'm not going to belabor the point, but you're going to want to pause the video to go at your own pace. I really want you guys to try to master this material, and that'll take you actually pausing and stopping and working through some of these translations. Of course, mottos aren't as important as our like examples that we are going to get to, but it still helps for you to slow things down, since class participation is kind of the one thing we can't totally emulate doing this method. But this is from Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. There you see the motto encircling their little crest. It's kind of cool. Your hint for this is that it is we're gonna want to use an expletive construction, and I don't know. I bet you probably don't know what that means. But if you remember, I've brought this up before. That is like when we say there is no place like home, or it is raining, where the subject is preceded by a pronoun. It's kind of you're building up to a subject. Um, so we end up with something like the spirit is that which gives life. Or else you could say something like it is the spirit which gives life. So our main clause is just spiritus est, like it is the spirit. The spirit is that, or something like that. And then the relative clause is the next two words, qui vivificat, where qui's antecedent is spiritus. All right, we're done with mottos for now. This is the lectiones. That'll be in the Google form for today, below this video, presumably. I had to break them up into two chunks because they're on separate pages in the workbook. But I will have one single space to enter your translations on the Google form at the bottom. So just put them all together and just number them, obviously. Yeah. So, yeah. Again, I want you guys to enter that in the Google form. But if somehow you have issues with that, you can email it to me before 8 p.m. tomorrow night. All right, we're going to do some exercises on page 142. We're going to do number 4, number 5, number 7. The reason I'm jumping around is because, weirdly, 1 through 3 and number 6 lack relative clauses altogether. 5 doesn't have one either, so but it has something that is actually kind of useful to this chapter. So we want to focus on relative clauses because that is the big tricky thing this chapter. So I'm going to start getting into the notes on this translation, but before I do that, as always, I want you to pause the video and actually give this a try on your own. The vocab that isn't relative pronouns is actually pretty easy. Incipio is a word maybe that you'd get stumped on. Pause it now. You should have that vocab out anyway, so that should help. All right, I'm going to move on with some information about it. If you were totally stumped and you just kind of gave up without too much progress, that's okay, because that's better than just moving through the video rapidly without having looked at it, because now everything I'm going to address about the sentence will mean more if you actually try to do it on your own. Okay, so I'm pasting in these relative pronouns just to show you guys real quick. I'm not gonna That's not gonna show up on every slide because it takes up a lot of space. But that qui qui quad, that's how we're gonna refer to this relative pronoun. And remember, we're gonna translate it as who, which, or that, depending on the context. Whose, or whom if it's referring to like a person, which or that, or like of which if it's not referring to a person, right? Don't exaggerate how tricky these are. They're really not that bad. Um, Most of the time, you're translating them as like who or whom or which or that, right? So, but I am underlining here the relative clauses. That's kind of more important that you understand like how these clauses actually work. Part of the reason this sentence is so long is because we have two relative clauses. So it's a great warm up, given that we're all a little rusty after a week off. So it looks like those first three words, since I'm giving it away here, that's our main clause all by itself, just three words, pretty simple vocabulary there. And then we hit qui. The comma kind of helps us kind of understand this as being separate from the main clause. And then following qui, we have a relative clause that goes from qui to debet. And how do I know that like that is its own contained relative clause? I mean, they're usually going to start with a qui qui quad, and then they're going to last up until ending in a verb, mostly for our purposes at least. And so I see regera debet, and I'm like, okay, that's the verb of the relative clause. So when you guys are writing these out, like you should be, since you should be pausing the video and like actually writing this out, um, probably in Latin, if not, yeah, actually, I think that'd be good. You should probably write these in Latin. I'll make that a bigger deal next week. But I want you to circle these relative clauses, put them in their own nice little bubble. I'm underlining them because a circle would be clunky to do on PowerPoint. But you guys should circle them because the important thing is not like how you're going to translate the qui qui quad. That's pretty easy. It's that you need to understand these relative clauses are existing in their own little bubble grammatically. They have their own subject, their own verb that is separate from the main clause, and they're just going to be referring to something in the main clause. So this qui is going to be expanding on something in the main clause. And then yeah, we had a second relative clause too. This one is a good example of one because it starts with sine qua. So it's a little weird. It's actually starting with sine and not just like qua. So you can't always just think like, oh, it's always going to start with like the qui qui quad, and like that's exactly where it's going to start. Qua happens to be ablative. It has that long vowel. So look at the lower bottom left of the qui qui quad chart down there. Those are the ablative ones, quo and qua, and then quibus in the plural could be auxiliative. Uh, and then if it's ablative and it's near a sine, it's probably the object of sine, right? And there's actually this, I don't know if it's like a legal term, but it's just one of like the hundreds of Latin phrases that everyone is supposed to just like know, even if you're, an English speaker, and that is sine qua non, without which there is none. The est is kind of implied, meaning like if you have a piece of evidence in court or something is absent, then that means some conclusion is also not going to be present. Anyway, don't get bogged down in that. It's not super important. But let's keep moving. Incipio, like I said, that's a new verb. It means to begin. Okay, and so now I'm gonna move on. These first three words should have been easy. The only way you could have gotten bogged down on those is if you were like trying to pull in stuff from the relative clauses into that main clause. But yeah, this is just incipimus is first person plural. So we begin. We have truth, veritatem, direct object. Intellegere is to understand. I think some people maybe still don't know that word. It means to understand. So we begin to understand the truth. Incipio will often, if not always, take a complementary infinitive. In this case, being intellegere. So we have a direct object surrounded by verbs. And yeah, red is my official color for direct objects. I'm going to use a maroon for accusative objects of prepositions, since that's like almost red, but not quite. All right, so that's easy, right? And okay, now we have a relative clause. So that's where it's going to get a little trickier, but not too bad. So quae mentes nostras semper regera debet. The only thing you might be stumped on is maybe you forgot nostros, which is from noster, nostra, nostra, meaning our. Yeah. Okay. So moving right along, quae. Is it going to be which, that, or who? What's it going to be? What do we think? Uh, we kind of have a who in the main clause that we could be referring to. Uh, but it kind of depends on what the antecedent is here. So we begin to understand the truth. Maybe which or that is acceptable. Because we're not the only person in the main clause that we could be referring back to is the we. And there's kind of enough context here to understand that that's not really the case. Um, we begin to understand the truth. Because if that was the case, this relative clause would probably be interrupting the main clause, making the whole thing more tricky. It'd be like we, who blah blah blah, begin to understand the truth. And just the way the syntax is, it's kind of suggesting that the antecedent of quae is actually veritatem. We're going to talk more about this truth, which we begin to understand. So, which ought debet, right? That's the last verb in this first relative clause, ought to rule our minds. So, mentes nostras is the direct object of this relative clause. So, we already have two direct objects, one for the main clause, one for the relative clause. And nostras is getting that feminine, accusative plural ending, because mens mentis is a feminine noun, apparently. Okay, so that's the first relative clause. Not too bad. It's pretty straightforward. Yeah, quae was just the subject of that relative clause, whereas mentes nostras, again, our minds, is the direct object. Okay, and then sine qua valeri non possumus. This is also pretty straightforward, but sine qua, all of this is, each time we're seeing an example of these relative pronouns, kind of new for us. That would be without which we are not well. So, veritatem, once again, is the antecedent of this relative clause. The qua is referring back to the truth. Yeah. So it's like saying the truth, which should rule our minds, is also the truth, without which we are not well. Without which. I probably just made it more complicated saying it that way. But there we go. And without which we cannot be well. Okay, I got a little ahead of myself there. So let's break this down here, because we basically have like three little grammatical sections that are largely separate. The subject of the main clause is just we, because incipimus is first person plural. So I'm looking at the little note, the bullet points at the bottom. The subject of the first relative clause is quae. Quae's antecedent is the we from the main clause. That's incorrect. It's actually, is veritatem, is the truth. But I'm so far in this video, I'm going to keep going, so don't write that second note. But then this third one is correct. The qua is the subject or the relative pronoun of the last clause. And just like the main clause, the subject of the last relative clause is we again, because we see possumus, it's first person plural. And qua is the ablative object of sine there. Its antecedent is indeed veritatem from the main clause. That one is totally correct. Okay. A little rusty there. Yeah, I'm pasting back in that chart once again, just so you can see all of those. The only thing that's difficult about qui qui quad right now is that you probably aren't totally familiar with the cases. But if I'm going down from the blue nominative to the orange ablative, the nominative ending should look kind of like first and second declension nominative plurals, qui and quae. Quad's kind of weird. Neuter's always weird. That cuius, I'm looking at the green genitive, that has that ius ending, that pronouns love in the genitive, and the quorum quarum. That's straight out of first and second declension. Cui, it switches over to C for the genitive and the dative. Cui's a little hard to keep track of and know that it's dative, but third declension dative is also in an I, so that's a thing. And so if you see cui, it's probably going to be to whom, as I've typed there, where the plural is quibus. And then quim, quam, quod, those look pretty accusative-y. Quos, quas, quae. Pretty first and second declension accusative style. Again, the neuter's weird. And the ablatives, which we actually saw here, all the way at the bottom, quo, qua, quo. That's going to be like by which, or without which, or with which, stuff like that. All right, this is the second of our 3 examples for the day. So we're halfway through. This one, I already alluded to this, but it lacks a relative clause actually, but it still has something that's useful for us. So we see that quam, or think, oh, is that a relative clause? Is that the accusative feminine down there to the like center bottom right? It is not actually. If you remember, quam, the first time we got quam, it wasn't an accusative feminine relative pronoun. It was just this conjunction, how. So it can mean how. And they're giving us this example for the sole purpose of tripping us up potentially, or just like having us realize that we have to be careful about quam. It could be a relative pronoun, or it could just be the word how. So if it's the first word in the sentence, it's probably going to be how. At least for us right now, that's kind of the giveaway. So there is no relative clause here. Go ahead and pause and try to work through this. Vocab's pretty straightforward. Bona and dolki are a bit weird. I'll just tell you now, they're substantive adjectives, so I want you to treat them like, drumroll, direct objects. So how difficult it is, or is it? It is a little better. This isn't a question. To draw, trahara, from troxytructum, like tractor, draw, or pool. Draw goodness or sweetness, ex bello, from war. So, yeah, goodness and sweetness. That's how I'm translating bona and dolkia, because otherwise, draw good or sweet. Good is okay, but sweet as a noun, that doesn't work. Yeah. It would have been a chance for them to make a kind of complicated relative clause there, like that which is good or sweet from war. But yeah, I think they just want us to really focus on the quam. Okay, moving on to our last example for today. So please give this one your best shot. Puer matram temebat qua eum saipe neglegebat. The only vocab I could think of that might throw you guys off, besides, I guess, eum, but eum is him, is temeo temeri, and that is a new-ish vocab word for to frighten, like timid, like timor, timoris. So we do have a relative clause here. It is wildly straightforward. Pause and give it a shot, guys. Okay, what did you guys end up with? Hopefully, for one thing, you noticed that quae eam saipe neglegebat must be the relative clause at play here. This is structured a lot like the first example we did, where we had 3 words at the beginning of the sentence that form our main clause, and then we go into a relative clause after that, starting with a qui quae quad, ending with a second verb, right? We have temebot in the main clause, neglegebat in the relative clause. All right, matram eum, those are both direct objects, respectively, of their own respective clauses. Okay? And then from there, it can't get much more simple than that. So I'm going to move on to the answer now. Drum roll. Okay. The boy, puer, feared his mom, or like the mom, okay, verb to the direct object, who often neglected him. It's kind of a weird sentence, but so quae is our relative pronoun here, and its antecedent is the mom from the main clause. So even if qui quae quad didn't have cases and genders, we'd probably be able to tell that, but quae is feminine, just like mater, like mother, and it's also singular, so it needs to agree in number, but they are different cases. Matram in the main clause is the direct object, whereas quae in the relative is a relative pronoun. It is the subject of its relative clause. So the mother goes from being the direct object to being the subject of the relative clause as we expand upon her. So who, saipe, often neglected, neglegebat is imperfect tense, or was neglecting. Eum is the direct object of the relative clause, him. Once again, I'm pasting in the qui quae quad chart just so you can kind of cross-reference this. I think that's a big skill. Beyond circling relative clauses, I want you guys to just get the hang of actually identifying the cases, or the possible cases, of these forms of qui quae quad. All right, that's pretty much it for today. Thank you guys for being good sports about all of this new stuff we're doing, the online classes, I mean. And again, those lectiones are due 8 p.m. tomorrow night. One last time, I think I've already repeated this twice, but I want you to paste them into the provided space at the bottom of this very Google form. But if you do it, tomorrow and you like lost the link to the form or something, you just like can't get back to the email that has the link, then you can email it to me, and that's like fine. So yeah, I hope you guys do okay with that. We will check them on Friday, and then also it would not be a bad idea to just brush up on that vocab, like as you're translating, so that you're ready for the vocab quiz on Friday, your first online quiz. All right, thanks guys. Wallet.